Hello and welcome to the lecture on your researched social media project. This lecture assumes that you've already gone through and you've made all your corrections on formatting and content, and that you have pasted in your works cited or references page at the bottom of your social media draft. In order to begin a new page, you're simply going to put your cursor in front of the title, go to Insert, Page Break, and it'll begin a brand new page for you on the document. Make sure that you do highlight from top to bottom, and on the Home tab, set your paragraph formatting to 00 single, and then you will hand enter in between each of the major sections. This heading area will be single spaced with a double space in between each of your paragraphs. Your works cited or references page will have the same formatting. It'll be single spaced with double spaces in between entries, and each of these entries is going to have a hanging indent. Please make sure that you do use your tab key to line up the information in the heading section. If you don't use the tab key and you use the space bar instead, they won't line up correctly. I hope you noticed from the grading criteria that you need to introduce all source material. This means you cannot just begin a new sentence with a quote, paraphrase, or summary from one of your sources. While there are many ways to do this, the very easiest is just to introduce according to the author if you have one, or by the website if you don't have an author. For example, since I know I have to introduce all my sources, I can go ahead and do this on the references page so I have easy access to the information I need to correctly introduce my sources. So for my authors, I can say according to Susan Ken, Hannah Morgan noted, or J.D. Ripken argued for. Notice here though that when I introduce by the website name, I take it exactly as it's formatted in the reference entry, in italic. I also explain that it's a website. The University of Essex website pointed out that, or it was found on the University of Essex website that. Next, you add the information that you want to use from the source. If you paraphrase or summarize, you will not use quote marks. If you quote, you will want to make sure to include a quote mark at the beginning and the end of the quoted material. Please remember that if you only change a couple of words, that is still a quote. You're better off just keeping the original words of the author. Paraphrasing does not really mean just changing some words. A paraphrase also cannot use the sentence structure of the source. Rather, a paraphrase is like a summary of the main idea of an area, not just repeating what the author said. Once you know what information you want to use from the source, you should go ahead and cite it. While you may have been taught to always include the author's last name in a citation, that's usually not necessary. If you've introduced according to the author's name, which you should have done if you have an author, then you do not also want to include it in the citation because that's just repetitious. Instead, the focus in a citation should be to always make sure you include location information. Location information tells the reader where to look for the information inside the source. Since most web pages are not paginated, we generally cite location information of web pages using paragraph numbers. Citations in the source information, so that covers the rule of letting the reader know where the source information ends. Remember that the citation is still part of the sentence. It's married to the reference material, so the period never comes until the end of the sentence, which is after the citation. There's also no need to include any commas or other punctuation between the source material and the citation. This covers Rule 1, to introduce your sources, and Rule 2, to include location information for your sources in the citation. However, we still have one important rule we haven't covered. That's to include the first word of the reference entry. This allows the reader to quickly determine which entry the source material is from. If you have an author, you've already covered this rule when you introduced your source by the author's name. If you don't have an author, your reference entry should begin with the title of the article, which should be in quotes. If this is the case, you'll now simply add the first word of the reference entry into the citation in front of the location information. Make sure though to put this word in quotes to indicate that it is part of the title. Now you've taken care of all the rules of documentation. Your reader can easily tell where the source information begins and ends, knows where to find the information within the source, and knows which reference entry the source information is from. Now all you have to do is cut out the perfectly referenced information from the reference page, because that can only include the reference entries in the end, and paste it where you want it in the paper. Just make sure not to include source information as the first sentence or the last sentence of a paragraph. Those areas should be reserved for your topic sentence and your closing sentence. Source information should be used in the middle areas of the paragraphs to support your arguments or to add information you didn't know. Once you've double-checked your formatting and grammar one more time, you're ready to submit. That means making sure that you don't have any highlighting left in your paper, that all your paragraphs are formatted appropriately, and when you did your pasting, that it didn't mess up your paragraphs, and making sure that when you used your works cited entry, if you hit enter, it didn't mess up your area down there. This concludes the lecture on the Research Social Media Project. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope to see you again soon.